There was probably that one moment where you were on the train on your daily commute, or you were just walking around in a crowded area, and all you could see is people just glued to their phones, completely disconnected from the real world. And this is the point where you decide to go on your own phone and check social media to see what's up. And all you can see are some people socializing and having fun, and others in loving relationships. And you can't help but think to yourself, like, man, I'm actually feeling really lonely right now. And touching on the point of relationships, and even marriage even, this isn't a guaranteed solution to feeling less lonely, as those who are married can feel just as lonely as those who are single. It very much depends on the individual and their environment, not just their relationship status. Because when we look back at history, there were some who decided to stay single for long periods, whilst there were others who decided to just not get married at all. And they still seem to find some sense of purpose and happiness in, say, their work or passion, even with friends and family. And I'm sure you can relate that these relationships can feel quite complicated. Even if you do have a large network of friends and family, it's not the guaranteed solution to overcoming your loneliness, as you can still feel quite lonely and disconnected if you guys aren't on the same wavelength. Because we've almost been conditioned to believe that being alone isn't healthy, and meeting and socializing with new people would be the key to solving our loneliness issue. But is this even true? Because we often hear phrases like, you need to socialize more, and being alone isn't good for you, and you need to open up more. And while I do understand where these phrases are coming from, and they are coming from a place of care, I also do think that these phrases can be misunderstood. Because what I've noticed is that, especially for a lot of people, the act of socializing is almost a selfish act, where individuals are just not able to sit alone with their own thoughts and quote-unquote use others to overcome their feelings of loneliness. It's the reason why you might sometimes feel drained or depleted when you're interacting with another person, especially if they haven't worked on their internal issues. It's almost like them sapping your energy, and you just couldn't put your finger as to the reason as to why. And it's because I believe that we're all connected in ways which can't be easily explained. And I'll give you a couple of examples so you can better understand what I'm talking about. So, for instance, when you're around certain people, you may start to develop certain mannerisms or speech patterns, which you may not even be aware of. And this goes for strangers as well, where you may not even have a future relationship with this said person. Or even think about that time where you saw that other person across the room yawning. Now, a couple minutes later, you're yawning as well. Even when someone attractive smiles at you, you naturally smile back. It's almost an automatic response, which almost gives you an opening to connect with this said person, and almost create this positive feedback loop. And things only become an issue when you start falling into the feedback loop of negative thought, which is what we define and label this feeling as loneliness. And I do feel like there is this misconception that feeling lonely means that you have poor social skills, when in my opinion it can actually be the other way around, where feelings of loneliness can actually hold us back from developing those crucial social skills required to form those deep, meaningful connections that we're after. And forming these connections has played a vital role in our evolution, where we tend to feel safer when we are in the company of others, and we tend to feel endangered when we're alone involuntarily. And this feeling of not being able to get rid of this feeling of loneliness can diminish our feeling of control. And this can cause individuals to risk being exploited and feeling betrayal every time the individual decides to fulfill that need. And instead, they may resort to more pleasurable activities, such as heavy drinking or doom scrolling on social media. And as you can imagine, this vicious cycle can lead to isolation, which individuals may not know how to overcome. As, say, when you walk into a party, a classroom, or even a business meeting, that inner voice of loneliness may zoom in into that fear of judgment from other people, where your mind may be starting to ask questions like, what would they think of me? I don't know anyone here. What if they think I'm a loser? And it's just interesting to me how we spend a large amount of our energy being perceived a particular way. Take scam artists and even politicians, for example. Deep down, they know that at the very least, they have to give off some sort of lip service to display traits of compassion and empathy so that they can be quote-unquote trusted. And this sort of act has been something that humans have been doing for since the dawn of time. But what's interesting is that culture now pushes this narrative that becoming famous and successful, even if it means doing humiliating acts or quote-unquote selling your soul, is the path to making an individual happy. But instead, all it ever brings is more confusion. And you can see this with celebrities, where from the outside looking in, it looks like everything that a human can ask for, yet they feel lonely and miserable on the inside. And the reason is that because they lack the meaningful, genuine connection with both themselves as well as the people around them. But the thing is, most people around us are wearing masks, hiding their true intentions. So it makes it that much more difficult to actually read social cues and figure out who is actually being genuine. Because how can you tell if that person that you're talking to is actually being authentic? And in cities today, holding eye contact and starting a conversation isn't really the social norm. It just feels like people have subconsciously given up on forming those new social connections altogether, and instead would much rather stick with those people that they've met in, say, college or work. And the most in terms of social connection that you're going to get from another individual who isn't directly in your social circle is, say, when you're walking in a narrow pathway and there is another individual who's walking at you on the opposite end. You guys are going to instinctively give each other the space required. Maybe a nod, or even at the very least, some sort of acknowledgement for each other's existence. And that's as far as it goes. And even if you do have to get into a conversation with a stranger, now you have to account for the fact that they probably have a wall up and are probably wearing some sort of mask. And the process of trying to decode those signals of social ambiguity, if you will, is when the lonely suffers. When in fact they're just trying to form some sort of meaningful connection. And it's just crazy to me how much things have changed with technology and everything, and how we didn't really consider how we were supposed to adapt to this new environment, where our lives have become more atomized than ever due to a bunch of different factors, from the cost of living being high to there being a general distrust in the air when interacting with other people, and also the fact that everyone seems to be faking it online. And instead we try and fulfill these needs in other ways, such as messaging or sending memes to your mate. And this is something I like to call social snacking. But at the end of the day, it doesn't come close to meeting with someone, say, in real life and getting that real life human interaction that we're all craving for. And as people get older, as people are having less kids nowadays, many people resort to, say, adopting a pet, or even permanently living in the online world and creating those parasocial relationships as a substitute. And older individuals may have found it easier to develop those connections back in the day, and they may reminisce back to a time where they may have been bound to a small village and marry the person that their family chooses. In fact, it was mainly Christianity in the West, which was what provided that human need for connection and social transactions. And of course, there were other religions such as Islam, which were more dominant in, say, other countries respectively. And although this lifestyle may put you at ease, it also means that you're giving control of your life to another party. And it's a lifestyle which, in my opinion, lacks mobility. And that's not to say that things are perfect today, because in my opinion, I feel like the pendulum has swung the complete opposite direction, where there is a huge emphasis on oneself, and there's a lack of collectivism and looking for a higher power to guide you in life, essentially. And trust me, I'm a big proponent of building a strong identity and not relying on anybody else. But a larger case of building a strong identity is to collectively come together with other people who have also got a strong identity for a greater purpose. So I know I went on a bit of a side tangent, but I want to ask this question now, which is, how on earth do we maintain our independence whilst also being able to connect with others and get rid of that feeling of loneliness? And this is advice which I wish I told my younger self. Now, the first thing is to actually realize that being vulnerable is one of the best tools that you have in your toolbox when it comes to developing those deeper, meaningful connections that you're really seeking, and combining that with being genuinely interested in other people and not expecting anything in return. And this comes with naturally being curious. This could be you opening up a conversation in, say, public transport with this other individual about a book that they're reading, which gives the individual the opportunity to respond and continue with the exchange, or politely pull back and stick to reading the book. In this case, what you're doing is respecting the needs and the boundaries of the other individual. And if you're giving off this positive vibe, you may prompt the other person to actually share something about themselves. You've essentially created this abstract bubble where you're able to be comfortable between yourselves. And this is usually the kind of a process that most people form social connections. And it's not a competition. It's not being about the most social person in the room, but rather just being able to let the conversation flow naturally. And if the conversation doesn't seem like it's flowing, that's okay too, because every conversation isn't supposed to be perfect. But to start off, I know that striking up a full-blown conversation with another person is a bit tough, especially if you're not the most talkative person, and you're just not as open to trusting other people like myself. So what I did starting off was showing random acts of kindness to other people, which gave me this positive feedback loop where I was able to open myself to trusting other people. Because trust is the foundation where you're able to form these deeper connections with other people. Because you may have had these strings of negative thoughts, which you may have habitually engaged in, which creates this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of you trapping yourself into becoming more of a lonely individual. And this is the way to actually get out of it. I appreciate you watching the video, and if you're interested in one of the videos that are popping up on screen right now, feel free to check them out.